Sunset in the windshield.
This is the Crappie Connection, brought to you by Redneck Rubber, Power Crappie, Visit Ridgeland, B&M Poles, K9 Fishing, Cornfield Fishing Gear, Bobby Garland Baits, Genco Fishing, Denali Rods, The Direction TV, Top Hat Jigs, Crappie Magnet, Henderson Minnow Farm,
Hook and Bullet purpose-built optics.
I'll always find home on the banks of that oxbow.
So, you know, some of the differences here between the way I fish and where I fish compared to, say, where Jerry fishes. I am primarily known for an extremely shallow water fisherman. I'm the guy that's catching fish in 2 foot of water in 104-degree weather. I'm catching them there in February, and I'm also catching them in 6 foot of water, whether it's open water fish, standing timber fish, brush piles, stake beds. Now, where Jerry's out on Fort, I've heard Jerry talk about catching fish in water column areas that I'm not even attempting to try to go there and fish. I mean, that's just outside of my range. It's kind of a major difference from lake to lake how you're going to approach these different things, and that's something we're going to touch base on with like rod selection, tackle selection, presentations, things like that. As with me, you're going to see most of my boats going to be full of these 13 and 14 foot rods almost all the time, even up to the 16 footer. And I know that Jerry, you like to go with some of the shorter rods. So.
Yeah, I fish a lot with the lead 10, with the hook be 10-6, 11 footers, and then in the springtime, then I'll go when these fish move shallow and get a little spooky. The 13 foot rods, 14, and the new 16 I use this. But I'm predominantly we're vertical fishing, dropping on, so I like a little longer pole, at least 10 foot, and you know.
So my general rule of thumb, if we're going to go here with rod selection, starting out on this, the deeper I go, the shorter the rod I'm going to use, because obviously I'm not worried about spooking fish when they're down deep. You know, obviously you're not going to be worried about your trolling motor noise, casting a shadow on them, things like that. So I'm going to get away with the shorter rod. The exception with that is when I have to cast at fish that are moving away from me or I can't get close to them in shallow water, I'll break that out. But most generally, the shallower I go, the longer the rod I'm going to use because I want control of that rod at all times. Same thing in deeper water when I'm using a shorter rod, I want control of that rod. So that's why you're hearing us talk about different selections for different things. With him using the 10 footer, the 10 footer is something that I hardly ever use. I don't target the range that he targets. So I'm either casting or I'm vertical jigging out of the distance. And depending on what kind of bait I'm using on them, that's going to have a big bearing on how I do that as well. So.
I want to use the shortest rod I can get away with. It's just typical. And now guiding is different than tournament fishing. But when I got customers in the boat, it's a whole lot easier for them to handle the 10 or 11 foot rod than a 16 foot rod. And it's like you said, I've been catching fish on Fort since December, 20 to 45 foot deep. And when they're that deep, like I said, we're not spooking them. You can get right on top of them. I've been using a 10, 11 foot rod so we can just drop straight down. It's plenty long. I could actually probably drop down and catch them with an 8 foot if I wanted to. So, and then when you get shallower, like you said, the shallower the water, the spookier the fish are going to be. So then that's when you get to see these guys using these long rods.
So on the Red River where I was at back in October, I was fishing anywhere from 6 to 4 foot of water. I was fishing highly pressured fish. And we were throwing some bigger action baits at these fish that were roaming around. And if we were lucky, we could find a fish that was active that would chase a bait and would knock it pretty hard. You know, so we're using an 8 foot rod and even a 12 foot rod for that kind of stuff. But the majority of my fish came off of a 16 foot rod and we were using a 1/28 ounce hair jig. And we were having to reach out as far as we could from the boat because they wouldn't chase anything, so a short rod wasn't going to help me any at all. And we were having to take that bait and lay it directly on a fish's nose and pester him until he would bite it. Huge key in what we done was having that 16 foot rod, and if they offered a 25, I'd have probably been fishing with it, to be honest with you. Not something I fish with every day, but having that tackle box of rods out there to change from day to day is going to help put more fish in your boat. I fish a lake that floods a lot, and when I'm fishing back up in the willow trees, I'll have 6 different rods rigged because I may have fish that are directly under my boat. I may have fish back up under trees that I can't reach, and I need to be able to weave a pole way back in there to be able to get to those fish and make those presentations. So expanding your tackle box, huge deal with what you do as a crappie fisherman. There's a lot of guys out there, bread and butter, they're going to fish one way all the time. If it works for you, that's great. But if you're a guy that fishes all the time and you want to catch fish every day, that's why this store's full of tackle like it is. We want to be able to have all that in our boat, plus in our mind to be able to go out there and catch those fish day in and day out.
If I have a question, right, feel free to ask any question you want to ask in this at any time over what we've talked about. Line?
Yeah.
We're fixing to get to that. I mean, you done any more on the rods?
What's that?
We'll talk any more about the rods. So, for 20 years of guiding tournament fishing, I hated braid. I was a mono guy. I used strand, clear blue, fluorescent, 10 pound, 100% of the time. Since there's been some advancements in braid, I feel like, and live scopes come out, we're targeting a lot bigger fish. I went to braid. I'll tell you a little quick story. The reason I went to braid, so we have a tournament on Lake Fork called Crappie Fest. And it is a one fish, the biggest fish wins the tournament. And unless if you catch a 3 pounder, it's going to pay about 15 grand. But just a under 3 pound fish is going to pay about $7,000 for first place. First year live scope was out. I'm using my 10 pound clear blue strand, and I had my 2 boys, one of my son in the Army, he's home on leave, and we pull up and I said in the boat arc, I said, there's that fish is pushing 3 pounds. Let's get him. And Luke tried to get in there and couldn't get him. He said, Dad, you catch him. I dropped there and that fish bit, line broke. You know, then I'm thinking, I hope it's a drum. You know, so fast forward a week, Crappie Masters are there. We have a tournament, 2-day tournament. Second day of the tournament, me and my cousin out there, I looked down, I said, that fish pushed 3 pounds. I dropped down there, catch this, stick this fish, get it in the net. I grab it, and in the top of its mouth, there's a blackened chartreuse, at the time, crappie thunder, Strike King crappie thunder, stuck in his mouth. And I said, I'm not using. Then I looked, and blood's running down this fish. He swallowed the bait that I had. So the bait that was on the top of him was my bait from the week before, still in his mouth. Same jig head, everything. So that 285 helped us in that tournament that day. But if I'd have caught it the week before, it would have paid $7,000 in that line broach. I went immediately. I said, I'm done with this mono on Lake Fork on these big fish. I went to braid. And there's good and bad things about braid, but we are both mad braid is what we use.
The quality of the braid is a big selling point to me. So when Micah approached me with the braid, he came to me and he said, hey, will you fish with this in my boat? And I said, man, I'm just going to tell you, I hate braid. I mean, I absolutely hate braid. It tangles up, it backlashes, you know, just a laundry list of issues that I have with it. He said, but here, try it. And he's a great guy. So I said, okay, I'll put it in my boat. So I went to fishing with it and I found out, hey, this stuff's a lot more manageable, it's castable, and it's really good. But the one thing that I found with it as a guide every day that's going to pertain to your average people is that when we're out there on the water, a lot of people can't feel subtle bites. You know, if you don't fish every day, you miss those bites. So I'm putting braid on these poles and I'm handing them to clients, and now when a fish comes up and subtly bites it, there's no stretch in this, no give. They're feeling those bites that most people won't feel, and it's helping them put more fish in the boat. Not to mention, a lot of people don't set the hook very good. That's another problem as guides that we deal with, is people just don't set a hook. But with braid and not having any give in it, they're actually sticking more fish and successfully getting them in the boat because they're getting better hook penetration. So there's definitely things about it that are pluses. Hanging up, straightening your hook out. Nobody likes to retie. I hate retying, but I can straighten the hook out, grab a pair of needle nose, pop it back into place. We're rocking and rolling again. So I've made the transition. I keep braid on most everything in my boat, and I wouldn't do it if it wasn't a quality product. Not that there isn't other braids that are quality products, but this one I will back 110%. Micah's a great guy, and he makes a really, really good product. So this is something that's going to stay in my boat for now.
I like the smoothness of it. What I hate about braid a lot of it, when you drop dinner and you pull it through your eyes, you just feel it drag, just skipping all the way through. I want smooth. I don't like that drag like that. And this braid is really, really smooth. So that's why I like it. Same thing as he does, the quality of it. I fished with it a year before it was ever on the market. Me and Todd Huckabee secretly was using it with all our guide trips for over a year. Nobody knew. Everybody thought we was using another brand. And we were using it. And it took us a year before we finally got it where we wanted it. And it's good stuff, you know. And I have no need, you know, people talk about worried about clear water and high vis line or braided, worried about it. You know, for example, we won Table Rock in 2020. That water, who's fished Table Rock in here? Anybody fish Table Rock? Yeah, well, don't waste your time. It's not very good water.
It's tough.
We had this tournament there, and everything I read how clear it is. And it's really clear. Now there's some places with some color to it, but really clear. So we went, I pulled all my braid off, put 4 pound, 6 pound clear line mono, and after 4 or 5 days of breaking off every time I hung up and all that, I just didn't like it. I went back to my braid, and that's what I was fishing, 20 pound braid, high vis braid, and on Table Rock when we won that tournament. Those fish do not care, and he has a good theory of it actually helps.
How many people out here are skeptical about using braid or skeptical about fish being able to see your line and it keeping them from biting it? I mean, there's a lot of crappie fishermen. They're going to say 2 pound test, this, that, and the other. So the two theories on that is, how many out here have ever fished with yo-yos or limb lines, trot lines? How many crappie have you caught on yo-yos and limb lines and trot lines with staging? Or you're using a gold hook that's this long. It doesn't affect them, because what it amounts to is a fish that is willing to bite and is hungry will bite. A fish that is not willing to bite and is not hungry, you have nothing in your boat you're going to catch that fish with short of dynamite. I can assure you of that. So the other thing with that is, a friend of mine was a biologist, did a lot of scuba diving, they did a lot of testing. He fishes on Lake Ouachita, one of the clearest lakes that I have ever been in. I mean, on a normal day, you can see 10, 12 foot deep. Other days, you can see almost 20 foot deep. Spearfishing, the whole 9 yards. This guy goes out every day, fishes with 12 pound high-vis yellow line. This guy fishes every single day for crappie, catches his limit every single day, and other people I'm talking to is not even getting bites. The whole idea behind what they've done in tank testing and when he was scuba diving is they're throwing this yellow line past a brush pile. These fish sitting on these brush piles are seeing this yellow line come across that brush pile before the bait ever gets there. It causes them to upright and they're looking at it, they're checking it out. Well, the next thing that happens is the bait comes behind it. They're already poised in the position to run straight up and eat it. As where with clear line, the only thing they see is the bait when it gets there. Now he's playing catch up to run and get it. And if he's a little crappie in a lake with stripers and flatheads and everything else, he don't want to get far from that brush pile. So you're having to make more throws at that brush pile to catch those fish, where when you're giving them something like this, they're seeing it ahead of time, they're turning and coming to it. I can back this theory from spider rigging over the years. I would have 8 poles on the front of my boat, 4 of them with yellow line, or I could even go with 4 with clear line and 2 with yellow line. I would catch 10 to 1 on those yellow line poles every single day over that clear, no matter what clarity of water I was in. Now, maybe that's coincidence. I feel like I've tested it past coincidence, but I base my living every day using this yellow line, and it hasn't checked me up a bit.
No, I think that they're, bass fishing, guiding on Lake Fork, it's one of the premier bass lakes in the world. It's one of the most pressured bass lakes in the world. Those fish are caught and released so many times in their lifetime, they don't want to bite anything. I see on those fish that are caught and released like that, where I know from bass guides, some will swear that you have to use this. I got a buddy, he throws a 17 pound fluorocarbon 365 days a year. He doesn't care if it's muddy, it's clear, or whatever. And he makes a living doing it. So the bass, even though they can see the line, that's not necessarily, or the crappie, why would that run that fish? Why would that fish not bite? They see that bait come by. They don't know what that is. And most crappie, think about it, are caught once in their life. And the next thing they're doing is getting a knife put to them. So they don't get to be educated over and over and over and over like bass will. bass might get caught on Lake Fork 150 times in his life over 10 years if he lives to be big. A crappie, you know, if he's 10 inches and he gets caught, he gets clean. So, you know, that I don't buy that theory. He doesn't buy that theory.
Absolutely.
And we both make a living catching crappie.
No.
So if I thought clear line would help make my living easier or make me more money, I would be using it. So, you know, that's
What I've noticed with using lighter line, the only thing that it has increased in my boat is the amount of fish that get broke off before they make it to a dip net. I mean, day in and day out, if I was to fish with 6 pound test, I would say in a full year's time, at least 60% of the big fish that we hook would be broke off. You know, because people trying to pick them up, boat flip them, and wrap around stumps, stuff like that, they're just going to snap off on you. We've gotten to where we just boat flip most of everything we catch. I have videos out of me picking up 5 pound drum with this braid and setting them on the deck of the boat. Do the same thing with a crappie. The longer you've got him on top of the water flopping, the better chance he's got of getting off. If I've got him in the air, airborne, and he comes off here, he still lands on the floor of the boat behind me, but he goes home with me. So it's one of those. Any of you out here have any questions as far as like deep or shallow? I don't know. I know around here we've got some shallow lakes that people are fishing. I don't know any deep ones we've got here too close by.
Table Rock.
Table Rock.
Nobody goes.
I don't blame you.
Go
there. Yeah.
You know, this time of year, even in February, you see some guys that are catching crappie in 2 or 3 foot under the surface, 4 or 5 foot of water, chasing shad after a couple days of warm up. And everybody else thinks they're on Bog Lake at 25 foot deep on this time of year. So I like fishing shallow when I can. I like to do it.
Well, one thing about shallow fish, whether you're in deep water or you're in shallow water, when fish are shallow, they're generally up there active. You know, so anytime you can find fish in shallow water, you generally have a little bit better luck of catching those fish. We've noticed over time, and I'm sure you have too, that if say we go out and say we're in just 12 foot of water, for example, and we've got fish that are on the bottom 10 foot deep, and we've got fish that are 8 foot deep, and some that are at 4 foot deep. You'll notice that throughout the day, there's certain fish in that water column it's not worth your time targeting because they're sitting in an inactive state. You're not going to catch them. So, you know, just like if you're fishing with a bobber or anything else and you're playing around in the brush pile and you say, oh, I'm moving it up, I'm moving it down. Well, I'm starting to catch them here. Well, you stay that way the rest of the day. You may have been fishing around fish all day, but you hit the depth of water that active fish are sitting in, and the only fish you're going to catch. So it's just like you're saying, when that sun comes out and those fish get high in the water column, they're up there for a reason. It ain't up there just to expose themselves for everybody to come eat them.
Now, a lot of times they're feeding, but also if the water's got a little color to it and it's 40-something degrees and the sun gets out, that's going to be the warmest water too. If the sun gets out, I catch them in February on the floor. Those fish make their move. You like the spawn, everybody said, 60 degrees, boy, I can't wait till them fish get shallow. Them fish have been way up there shallow for a long time and you didn't know it. You just haven't been fishing for them. A lot of them, like on Lake Fork, they leave deep water, they run up to the mouth of these bays and they suspend and they hold. They're there right now. They may not spawn for 6 weeks, but they're within sight of where they're going to spawn. But they're out in the deep water and they'll suspend 2 to 8 foot deep and 15 to 20 foot water. And they're just sitting out there. They're not on structure. Very few are. They're just suspended in open water. Sun gets out, they'll keep rising up. And I've literally caught them. I don't know how I couldn't see them. They're that shallow with live scope. Just see them out there, this far under the surface when that sun comes up. Because that's going to be a lot warmer than that muddy bottom down there in 20 foot water. So that's one thing we learned with crappie. They will do this a lot more in the water column throughout the day. I used to think if they're 12 foot deep, they were all 12 foot deep. No, what he just told you a while ago. There's fish 6, 12, and 20. Well, the 12 foot fish will bite. These other two may not bite very often. So when you were fishing, you were putting a bait before live scope. We were putting a lot of baits in front of a lot of fish that we didn't know were there. And we'd catch one and say, oh, that's where they are. No, that's where the aggressive one was. That's where that one was. Well, the next one might be, you'll find a sweet spot throughout the day. I see it at Fork all the time. We're fishing that 57 foot water and I'm on a boat arc tree that's 45 foot tall. I can pull up there and say, there's 3 big fish, 14 foot deep in here. There's another good fish at 29 foot and there's a really big one at 47 foot. Well, I'm gonna go after the shallow ones. Those fish hardly ever bite. Hardly ever bite. Now, if he does, he's big, but they will not bite. The ones that usually bite are those that 28, 30 foot fish. And and those ones down there at 40, sometimes they won't bite. Tomorrow, it may be the opposite. I can't catch a fish I can't get one that's less than 30 foot deep to bite. So, why are their fish suspended throughout the column that high? I mean, I don't know. It's their mood or the time of day or whatever. And then sometimes you won't see anything unless it's 20 foot deep or whatever. So, before live scope, things to me were a lot more simpler.
Oh yeah.
To me, my mind thinking. I can go out here and I pull up to a tree, 2 pulls deep, I caught a fish. Now I'm gonna go to this tree and go 2 pulls deep, not catch one, I'm gonna go here, catch one, and that's all I did. But what I didn't know was there was fish 4 foot deep and there was fish on the bottom, on that same tree. If you'd have told me that, I wouldn't have believed you. With what we're seeing with this forward-facing sonar, it has taught us so much.
We put nails and coffin lids on old thoughts and theories, you know, and then there's a lot of new things that we've figured out too. Another thing that's crazy is if you think of it this way: if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and if it ain't working, make something else happen. So don't be afraid to make changes until something starts working, and then lean on that the entire time, whether it's changing depths, presentations, areas in the lake, things like that. I'd fished a Central Arkansas Crappie tournament probably about 3 years ago, and I had fish found in about 22 foot of water, and they were there really good. I was catching them spotter rigging. I go out day of the tournament, and conditions as far as weather and water levels and things like that hadn't changed a bit. Knew the fish were there. I was feeling really good about it. I go out and I start fishing, and I'm not catching anything. I'm not catching anything at all, and I was like, man, this is horrible. I'm an hour and a half into it. I hadn't got a bite, and I've been catching these fish just as fast as I could swing them in the boat during practice. So I finally said, well, I've got to make a move. I reel up my pole, set it in the rod holder, reel one up, set it in the rod holder. I'm just getting them ready. Turn around, look, I got a pole halfway in the water just yanking like crazy, and it wasn't this deep. Pull it in, I've got a 2-pound fish. Before I can get him off, the other pole I rolled up's doing the same thing. So I wind up reeling all of my poles up to this deep in 22 foot of water. And I wind up winning that tournament with almost 15 pounds. And I went from not catching a fish to right back to what I was doing because something changed. I don't know what physically changed, but something changed. And being able to make that adaptation and then stick with it the rest of the day is what grinded out and caused me to catch fish. So it's a day-to-day thing that you can change, and once you figure something out, ride it till it quits working, and then change again if you have to. But more than likely, there's fish where you're at. You just got to figure those fish out every single day. The same thing with that water column we're talking about. You figure out that the high fish are the ones you need to target. Don't waste your time with the low fish. Stay on the fish that you know you can catch.
Anybody have any questions?
Are you fishing the same shallow water in January that you would in April? Or
Sometimes I am. The main thing with crappie, as far as shallow water is concerned, obviously your side scan and stuff, you know, a lot of people go up through these areas and they're like, oh, well, I graphed all in there and there was no fish there. No, there was absolutely fish there. They were just running away from your boat before you got them on your electronics. Yeah. If there is massive numbers of shad, especially in lakes that have big numbers of crappie in them, there is always crappie there that are eating those shad. I don't care if it's 6 inches deep. If there's shad flipping everywhere up there, there are fish that are there eating those shad. I mean, they're going to go where the food is. No way around it. I mean, if somebody rings the dinner bell at home and says dinner's ready, come and get it, it's in the kitchen, you're not going to go to the backyard. You know, you're going to go where the food is. And that's the same thing with the fish. So yes, we catch them. I've caught them with ice forming around the lake and 1.5 feet of water. Same thing in the summer. I've caught them in the same conditions, you know, just because the shad were there, and it could have been a windblown incident that caused those fish to be up there. One thing that happens in that summertime pattern for that shallow water, dissolved oxygen is a real thing. It gets really hot. The oxygen starts depleting from the water, so fish can't survive deep. I mean, they may go down for a second to cool off, but they've still got to go back where they can breathe. Shallow water, when waves are generated through both wind and boat traffic, it's an aerator. It just puts oxygen in shallow water better. That's why they're up there. It's not because they want to be in 102-degree weather. They have to be up there. That's where they're at. So, yeah, we do fish a lot of the same stuff. I honestly believe that you can catch fish in a lot of lakes in less than 3 foot of water year-round. I really do. I've been duck hunting breaking ice before daylight and have seen crappie laying on the bottom underneath ice in water that deep. Sure enough. Anybody got any other questions on something like that as far as just kind of those weird little out of the way things?
Yeah, we both tie, as far as when we talked about the line, knots. And that's another, not, I'm gonna say controversial, but there's definitely two camps there. I'm a sense knot. Do not use loop knots. Never have, never will. I see absolutely no need for a loop knot. Oh, it gives the jig more action. I've learned, especially, the stiller you hold it, the better you are anyway. I don't. He'll use a loop knot. He has more confidence in that.
So I don't have knot all tie.
Yeah, and the only knot I tie is a sense knot. So there you go. I mean, who's right? If I tied a loop knot and went and fished, I would catch probably as many fish as I do with the knot I do, and so would he. But he has confidence in that knot. I have confidence in my knot. If your knot is holding up for you and you know how to tie a good knot and it's holding, keep using it. What I want a knot to be able to do is I want it to be as simple as I can get it and quick to tie. I don't want to have to do all kind of crazy stuff. And now, as I've gotten older, you see these around my neck?
Not race.
No, you're probably quicker. But now I got to where I have to do this to tie one, you know. So I want it to be as easy and quick as possible.
So there's different theories on how you can go about with your knots, just like he's saying, and it's confidence. The one thing that makes me lean on the loop knot all the time is, for me, it's super simple to tie. And after we're done with the seminar, if y'all want to come by and get like a close-up of how I do this, I'll show you. I basically just run the jig on the line. I'm going to double the line over. All I'm doing is tying a half hitch. Just a standard half hitch in my line. I flipped it one time. I run the jig back through it. So it's just your standard overhand knot, except for now the jig is sitting in the center of it. Now, the reason I fish a loop knot all the time is not the action. The jig is going to do all the action in the world. The reason I do it is because no matter what, you see how that jig head is hanging? It's sitting perfectly vertical like what a shiner would swim in the water. No matter what, it is going to stay that way. Day in, day out, I do not have to reach down there, pull my knot back, anything like that. With that being said, when a fish bites this, if you have a hook that's hanging upside down or up and down like so, when you hook that fish, the only thing coming towards him is that point straight up. All right, that works to some extent. But if you understand it as a cam action like this, when it hits that fish, it has all of that rotation time before it turns up. So you're actually dragging across more surface area in that fish's mouth for that point to bury in before it gets turned straight up and down. So that's just kind of my theories on it and why I use that knot the way I do. It's easy to tie, and it keeps my bait sitting in a natural position no matter what.
Same reason why he said that flip and it gets that fish is the same reason I don't use it. I fish 99% timber, and you will lose a lot more jigs with that knot than my knot.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not gonna lie. This will catch stuff, and that includes
when my knot comes up, that hook won't do that. So the knot I tie, and I can't tell you that I come up with this one night at Lake Fork sitting in there. Braid's harder to tie knots. It'll slip on you and do all that stuff with you. So,
and this braid does not slip.
No. I'm gonna put my readers on.
Out here at the reel counter, I've been doing knot demonstrations to show you the
Yeah, if y'all want to
braid,
see any of this stuff later, you can come by. So I just I run it through there one time, and then I'll run it through there again. The second time, probably not needed, but I did it, so I stuck with it. Then I pull it up tight, so I just run it through there twice. I pull that main line up the line. I'm gonna grab this jig like this, and I'm gonna flip that jig between my fingers. 1, 2, 4 times. 3, 4. Go over it one more time. There we go. I've got a double loop there now. Then I take the tag in, run it in a loop. Go through there. Come on. Yeah. It's usually not that hard to get through there. I did not.
It always looks way more fumbly when you're trying to show somebody than when you just do it at your regular pace.
So this braid's frayed on the end, and it just keeps hanging right there.
I think I have to do with them glasses thing you was talking about again earlier.
No, actually the glasses help. Here, let me redo this. Cut this braid. It's frayed so bad I can't get it to go through. Cut that. Let's start over. So I got it through there. I'm gonna grab it. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, I got a double knot. I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna run it through it. Grab it. I'm not gonna pull it tight. I'm gonna slide that knot to that eye. I'm just gonna push it down, then I pull it tight, and that's it. It's real simple, and it's strong. It will not go nowhere. Now, it is cinched. It's not a loop like his. So what he was saying is, and I've used the cinch all my life, so when I'm just sitting there looking, I grab it, I pull that line towards it like that, and it'll set flat. Now, if fish bites it or I hang up, it slides down. I don't want it hanging straight up and down like that. I just pull it to the eye and hold it like that. And if you've got a knot, like we said, use the knot that's working for you. Don't, you know, you got two guys here that's won the two biggest tournaments that's ever been held in crappie fishing, and we use totally different knots. You know, I mean, you know, some of the things we're opposite. You know, he won his on a shallow water lake. Guess what? He's probably one of the top 5 shallow water fishermen in the country. I won mine on a deep timber lake. I make my living catching deep timber fish. So it worked right into my favor. You know, so what I'm not saying I can't go to Millwood and catch fish, because I won tournaments on Millwood. And it's not saying he can't come to Lake Fork and win tournaments, because he will at some point in his career if he hasn't won one already. It's just that wherever you have, everything changes a little bit. You know, what works in Grenada, Mississippi is not what works, you know, necessarily in Lake Fork or certain other lakes like that. You know, Table Rock Lake, for instance, you know, is totally different. It's all about, a lot of crappie fishing is going to be specific to lakes and areas, and where he's talking about catching fish 3 foot deep in the winter, you go pretty hungry on Lake Fork if you fish that shallow in the wintertime. You've got to get out with a little bit of depth of water.
So same thing he's saying about different lakes you're going to fish, different regions we're going to fish different. Knowing what kind of bait fish you have in lakes is a really, really big part of it too. One thing that we found now, especially with live scope, is that profiles on your baits is a really, really big part of what's going on. I catch crappie on 5-inch swim baits. I'm talking about the same thing you see these guys throwing on Alabama rigs. I throw humongous baits. I've caught them my whole life pulling bandit crankbaits and 1-ounce rattle traps. Crappie are not afraid to eat big baits, but at the same time, they're a fish that will also focus on plankton. You know, so they have a broad spectrum of what they eat. And knowing your lake is a really big part of how you're going to choose what kind of bait you fish there. You know, if you've got threadfin shad, you're probably going to stay under the 3-inch mark. If you've got gizzard shad, you may go up to a 5-inch bait. Not your average guy isn't, but most crappie baits are small. And we found that over time, changing those profiles will make a huge difference. This time of year, I'm going to fish a big bait the entire time up until about June. I'm going to throw big baits, because last year's spawn for shad are now all 3 inches plus. There's no micro shad swimming around in the lake. They've either been eaten or they grew up at this point. Now after June when they spawn, I'm going to go down to, like I said, 1/28 ounce ice fishing jig. So with different profiles, you can go everywhere from skinny, fat body, everything in between. And here's just some examples of what you got, and we'll pass these around. I use Charlie Brewer sliders quite a bit. And that's going to be a skinnier body with a paddle tail. It's a good minnow imitation. This is something I'm going to use a lot in the summer. It's going to imitate those fresh spawned off shad quite a bit. And then later on into the fall, they have another option here in like the 2 1/8 inch minnow. So we're kind of still matching that as the year goes. And then when we start getting off into these cooler months, and even lakes that are full of threadfin shad, I'm going to run these beaver bottoms all the time. And it's a profile thing. That's the #1 thing with crappie that makes more difference than anything else, and I think you'll highly agree with it. That profile is everything. Once you find what profile those fish want, they'll go from looking inactive to absolutely breaking your wrist when they bite. It's just what it takes. So we do trim these up differently, and I'm going to pass these around.
Here's something. Oh yeah, you got it.
Kind of show you guys what these things look like. I'm going to start on this other end with some other ones here. And y'all can obviously see, I'm going to pass them through. You can see that there's different shapes, different sizes for everything. And in the fishing world, there is a lot of gimmick in it. And when we're trying to catch a fisherman with these baits, you come by and you say, ooh, that's nice. Well, you've automatically got confidence before you ever purchase that bait. You're going to fish a lot. But there's a lot of truth in taking these baits and experimenting with them. And you'll find that certain styles and certain profiles on certain lakes are what you need. So having a bunch of them is a big deal. One jig will catch fish everywhere you go, but will it really, really catch fish everywhere you go? Not every day. So then have to change that's a big deal.
Yeah, profile is way more important than color, I believe. And you know, there's days when color makes a difference. If the fish aren't biting, like you said earlier, the only thing that's going to make a difference is usually dynamite. But there's days where, if we polled everybody in here, your favorite bait color, I don't know, we might have 20 different answers. Well, if I tried to convince you you're wrong, that black and chartreuse is not the best color, you need to be using black and pink, and I stick black and pink on your rod and you go out there and you fish and you're using a color that you have zero confidence in, you didn't like the looks of it from the get-go, you're not going to fish very well. You're much better off having the wrong color but the right confidence in it. And then you're going to concentrate and you're going to fish better. And like I said, LifeScope's shown we were wrong on that. I used to think muddy water, I want a big, bright, dark bait or a real bright bait and all that. You can take a little gray hair jig and go to clear water, muddy water, it doesn't anywhere. Them fish can see way better than we ever thought they could see. Way better. We used to think, I need a big bait to move a lot of water, make a bunch of rackets, so get their attention in this muddy water. We were wrong. I mean, we were so wrong. Them fish can see it all. And my theory of when the fish get lethargic, I've been fighting it on Lake Fork here lately. These fish get up there and they will not react. I have a presentation I use 90% of the time on a fish. I drop a bait to them, that fish turns on that bait, I start slowly lifting. And if he comes, I keep lifting. And I never stop until he bites it. If that fish doesn't want to react, then I hold it still on it. And those fish at Fork last week, we timed it and took 6 minutes of holding the jig on a fish's nose before that fish moved a bit. And the only way they would bite, and this took me about 4 hours to figure out all this stuff. In the end, the only way we could get these fish to bite was drop that bait, stop it 2 foot above them. Can't get it right on them. Hold it dead still, and then shake the heck out of it. We were tipping with minnows, shaking it so hard the minnow would swim off sometimes. I'd say, oh, your minnow swim off really up. Go back now, shake it, and when you do that, you'd see that fish on that light scope. You can see them start to shake. They flutter, their gills flare. Yeah, he saw it, he's excited. And I said, hold it dead still. If he didn't come, I say, shake it hard. And he would, dart up there and jerk the pole out of your hand. That's after 4, 5, 6 minutes of him not even paying any attention to it. Oh, he saw it. He knew it was there. He just didn't want to mess with it. But finally, it irritated him that long. So when I run into those fish that's not aggressive, my first rule of thumb is I downsize. I go smaller on my baits. So we found out, especially on some bigger fish, that that's the wrong thing to do. Sometimes he won't, that little hair jig, you can't get small enough. Well, 1/64th on there, they won't bite it. You take that beaver bottom and pitch it on him, and he will smoke it. So nothing is written in stone. We're learning. The more we do it, the more I get confused sometimes. Like, well, what are you know what?
So one myth that I feel like there's been a big thing around forever is color. Everybody says, oh man, I tell you what, I fished all day long, and until I changed to that color, I couldn't catch them. And you say, oh, I disagree. I've had people argue back with me, oh yeah, but when I finally hung up, I lost that color. That was the only one I had, and I didn't catch them. Well, I'm going to tell you what happened. You fished all day and you ran all over the place and you wasn't on fish. When you happened to tie that color on within 2 or 3 throws, you found fish. You went to catching them. Then you hung up in the brush pile that the fish was in. You broke off the only jig you had, but you ran the fish off in the process. That's why you quit catching them and now color was the only one that mattered. Now, with the theory on that being said is colors do make some difference, okay? And when I say that, I say it kind of loosely because in certain water clarities, whether it's dingy or light penetrations, different depth of water, I do believe that fish can see different colors at further distances. Not great distances, but they may see it 3 or 4 more inches. And it's just like, if I can get a fish to see a bait 5 foot away, I'm going to catch more fish. If I can get them to see it 3 inches away, I now have to put my bait in the water more to hopefully get it 3 inches of a fish. But there's not a fish in this world that wakes up and says, I'm only eating a rainbow shad in the morning. I'm only eating a black and green shad in the morning, because they don't exist. But at the same time, they do make some difference. So having the different colors is a big deal because you might be catching fish, but you may change that color slightly and it's just enough to improve that visibility to where more fish are seeing your bait, which means you're going to catch more fish. But as far as saying a color's going to catch them because they won't bite that color, I highly disagree with that.
My first concern when I go out there is the profile, getting the reaction. So I can tell by the way these fish are reacting, they're smoking it. But then if they're biting it and I'm missing some fish, or they're flopping off on top of the water, or they're flopping off as soon as we get them in the net, they're all hung on the outside of the mouth, and I'm using a beaver bottom, and let's say I've got a June bug chartreuse trimming tornado, I will turn around, which I don't have one here, and I'll say, okay, they're biting this bait. That profile's working really good, but I'm missing some fish that are flopping off. I will change the color then. I may go to a bone meal, which is a white chartreuse. And then if they started helling that bait, then I've dialed in on a shade that they're really honed in on good. I want to have to stick my finger down that fish's throat to punch that jig out every time. Because when you see them fish inhaling it, choking it like we call it, you're dialed in. And then 3 hours later, they may start missing that beaver bottom. They may start hitting it or not reacting as aggressive to it. I'll say, all right, let's put a little hair jig on there or change it to another little smaller bait. Boom, they're back to smoking. And that can change hour by hour sometimes.
Well, fish go through feed cycles.
Yeah.
So you have fish that only want to feed in the morning, only want to feed in the evening, and depending on what season and of the year it is, there's a huge difference in that. In the wintertime, fish don't have as many feed cycles, and they are really bad to feed at night. So a lot of times in the winter, people are like, man, the fish are there, I just can't get them to bite. Well, it's freezing cold water. They're eating shad, and it's just like if I take a shad and I set him in the refrigerator, he's going to last 3 or 4 days. If I pull him out of that refrigerator and I throw him on a hot sidewalk, he's going to last an hour. So in the summertime, fish go through more feed cycles. So you don't see that pattern change like he's talking about. Now in the wintertime, in the fall, and even spring, you're going to see that happen where it's like it's on for an hour, it's off for an hour because they got full. They ate really, really good, and they have a slower digestive tract that time of year. So until they become hungry, they're not going to bite as much. So there's a lot of little factors that play into that whole jig selection, color selection, and profile selection. Even how often are the fish going to feed that day? I mean, it's a lot more than we're just going to show up and soak a minute today,
Yeah, that whole, what do you think you do? Like you're seeing fish, you drop, you can't get on the bite. Well, you changed every color. You're getting 1 out of 15 to bite or 10. What do you do?
I'm going to say recliner and sweet tea.
But you're on a guide trip, and I'm an hour into this trip, and I realize these fish aren't biting very good today.
Hey, I got a question. If the moon shines all night, is it a true story that they feed at night by the moonlight?
Oh, yeah.
They absolutely will.
I hate a full moon.
I hate it. You can go out at nighttime on a lot of lakes, especially in the summertime. Go out at night, turn your trolling motor off, let the wind drift you, and take your spotlight every 5 minutes and turn it on and shine it under the surface. And you'll see crappie running underneath the surface, and you can hear them at night actually sucking the water everywhere on top. They will absolutely pull up and feed like crazy on a full moon. It makes for a tough day of fishing.
Yeah. If I do get a bite, it's going to be 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon before I can get a consistent bite on a full moon. But what I was saying is, was kind of asking a question. If you can't get these fish to bite, you only catch it 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 15 to bite. What do? The only thing I figured I'd do is cover more water, drop on more fish. You know, I'm gonna be more aggressive. I'm gonna really drop on them. I know what they're gonna do. That fish don't bite, I'm going to the next one. And that's something else that I see with anglers. You know, there's a time to slow down and really, really, really pick a spot clean. Be very methodical about it. But for the most part, with live sonar, we can see these fish. We learn what reaction's going to take, what kind of presentation, what color bait we need to be using. Once we dial that stuff in, which we're going to figure that out pretty quick, then it's a matter of covering water. Most anglers I see, and this isn't a live scope thing either. This is, you pull up to a brush pile, pull your buoy out, drop your trolling motor, tie up, whatever it is you do. You drop down there and bam, 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 you caught 3. Immediately.
I'm gonna be lazy here.
Most people will say, man, we caught 3 here, and they're set there the rest of the day and never catch another fish.
So I'm right there with Jerry on the theory of covering more water, putting my bait in front of more fish. But one thing that I do often, especially with me being a primarily shallow water fisherman, is I'm gonna change my presentation if the fish aren't doing what they want. I mean, I lean on fishing vertical a ton, you know. But there's also those times where I know if I take an action bait such as a Charlie Brewer slider swim bait, even a curly tail or anything like that, and get back off those fish, cast past them, and then bring something by them. A lot of times just making a fish chase something will trigger an aggressive bite. Reaction bites are a very, very big part of fishing. Just like trout. Let's use rainbow trout for an example. They'll eat everything. They'll eat corn and worms and flies and all this other stuff. But 99% of the time it's a reaction bite. They live in fast water. Something comes by them quick. The only option they have is to eat it or starve. And I use that same principle with crappie very, very often. I don't give them a lot of time to look at stuff because sometimes just being real fast in their face and out of their face, they don't have that choice to really stare at something and make up their mind. It's, man, if I'm going to eat it, I better eat it now or it's gone. And it works out a lot of times, especially with big fish and big baits. I'll throw those big 5-inch swim baits at those crappie, and I mean, a lot of times I've done through 10 other things at those fish. They look at it, swim off, you put that big bait in their face, one of 2 things is going to happen. They're going to run from it or they're going to eat it. Well, if he runs from it, guess what? I ain't got to waste no more time on him. It's time to go find another one anyway. He's gone. I either caught him or he left. So
quick, how many people have live scope in here? What would you say, 50%?
yeah, probably.
That's actually more than I thought that would. No, I mean, me and Todd's been talking about this for about 3 days, percentage of people with live scope versus that don't have live scope nowadays. And is anybody in here hate live scope? You got it, you like it, right? Has it helped you out learning on the fish though, behavior? Do you feel like you're a better angler now?
How many of you struggle to use your live scope?
Some days you hate it. Some days you hate it.
Yeah, so I mean, how many of you struggle to use your live scope as far as you don't feel like you're utilizing it to its top amount? Okay, so one thing that I'm sure we both feel pretty confident on is boat control. Boat control's a huge thing. I do a lot of on-water lessons with clients with live scope, and I will take them on one trip. I'll show them how to use their settings and how I use it. Second trip, I stand behind them and I try to coach them. Number one thing I'm going to tell you for everybody that's got a live scope, if you want to improve it, don't ever turn your screen on. Go put your boat in the water at the boat ramp. Use your foot control trolling motor or whatever trolling motor you're using. Pull up to the dock, parallel park, and stop on a dime without ever hitting that dock where you can step out. When you get to where you can stop your boat and work it like that right there, then you're ready to turn your screen on. Because until you can hold that boat still and keep that thing pointed at a fish, you're going to struggle to catch those fish. I mean, it's just part of the deal. Boat control is a huge part of it.
And just to give you a little tip, your trolling motor, your style of trolling motor, if you run, I run a Garmin, you run a Ultrex?
No, I run a Fortrex.
Fortrex, okay, so cable, fast turning. We run, I have mine on the trolling motor shaft, my transducer bracket. So you, if you've got electric steer like an old Terra or one of these XI5s or something that you're running with a remote, put that on a pole because you're going to end up spot locking and bumping that trolling motor up and up to fish. You're not ever gonna run that electric steer with your remote and be good enough to put it on the trolling motor and hold yourself. I don't spot lock. The only time I spot lock, when we stick a fish, I spot lock. So when I'm messing, going back here, I come back, we had to move. As far as fishing, I never spot lock, never. That's not what spot lock's for. It's just to hold the boat whenever I'm doing something else. So your trolling motor is going to determine a lot of whether you go pole or transducer on your trolling motor and your style of fishing. If you're a dock fisherman or a brush pile fisherman owning it, a pole is wonderful.
Here, I'm already shaking already.
Point that pole over there, point it back here, and you guide it back to the boat, you fish it the same way that you can. The way I fish, you're going to be sitting in front of the boat fishing dead out the nose of the boat every single time. So it's, yeah, so it depends on your style of fishing, can determine on whether you want a pole or whatever you have on your boat.
Where's my ticket at, Wade?
I'll come back and get you one.
Yeah, he'll give us a ticket. Call this.
So, anybody else got any questions? Because I mean, we're starting around pretty close on this deal. I mean, in anything. I mean, if it's pertaining to crappie fishing, we'll be more than happy to try to help any way we can on that.
Yeah, touch real quick on crappie scent.
On
like
scent?
Niblets or sprays or...
That, you know, it's kind of a loaded question. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I personally don't feel like it makes any difference whatsoever. I had a guy one day, and I'm not just going to blast out there and say it. I had a guy one day that made a big thing about scent. He had to have a nibble on there, this, that, and the other. And I literally took a jig I had in the boat and I soaked it in gasoline, and I caught just as many fish with a jig coat soaked in gasoline. But at the same time, there are times like Jerry right here, and I have seen this in the past too. I don't think most of the time it makes a difference. It's another small part of your tackle box that can help you. Because here lately, Jerry's been catching a lot of fish using scent, and he's seeing definitely that he doesn't catch as many without it right now.
A white crappie nibble or a crappie magnet, white is the one I use.
From
They seem to work better.
That's down to 4.
Yeah, F4.
So I mean, I've seen it make a difference both ways, and then at other times it don't. But it goes back to that thing again. Fish that don't want to bite ain't going to bite. Fish that want to eat are going to eat. But if it gives you confidence on the water that you're going to catch more fish using it, then absolutely use it. And don't let nobody tell you any different. I use some things on the water that not another crappie fisherman in this country is going to put in this boat. I catch fish on it. I couldn't talk nobody else into trying it. So
Let's give these guys a round of applause.
Always remember, cabin on the lake and a fishing pole. Forever here I'll rest my soul. I can feel my